Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clements, editor-at-large of Changing America, an editorial section of The Hill aimed at awakening the rising spirit of citizenship across the country. Since launching in the fall of 2019, Changing America has been devoted to telling powerful stories about climate change, about diversity and inclusion, education, health, and many more stories that are just really important. These inspire, we believe, they spark thought, they define need, and often demand action. Thank you for joining us for this special virtual event on preserving biodiversity in the United States. This is going to be a great program. Federal wildlife officials recently announced that 22 animals and one plant should be declared extinct and removed from the endangered species list. And taken off the list and declared extinct. This disturbing development comes as millions of species continue to be threatened by human activities and climate change. Unfortunately, it also offers a sneak peek into what the future might hold for our nation's precious biodiversity if no action is taken. What urgent and additional steps need to be taken to protect America's natural treasures? Over the next half hour, I'll speak with our terrific panel of experts to address this question and more. Together, we'll examine the state of American conservation movement and ask what the future holds for endangered animals across the country. I'd like to thank Changing America's presenting sponsor, Verizon, for its support of today's event. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at Changing America using the hashtag Changing America. We're broadcasting live, and if you experience any trouble with the live stream, please refresh the page. That should be a quick fix. Let's dive right in. Joining us today is John D. Johnson Sr., tribal president of the Lac du Flambeau Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. Tiara Curry is a senior scientist at the Center for Biological Diversity, as well as their Saving Life on Earth campaign director. And finally, we have Ben Masters, an esteemed wildlife filmmaker whose work documents the wilderness of Texas and its most important animal inhabitants. Really welcome to you all. And I just have to start this off saying I just finished watching Ben Masters' amazing film on the ocelot. If any of you get a chance to see this and any of his other films, they're pretty amazing in terms of just kind of framing, you know, the beauty of nature and the fragility of nature in America. So watch American Ocelot. But let me start with you, John. It's a pleasure to have you on today. And I know in Wisconsin, you and your tribe have been trying to fight a battle on behalf of wolves that are there, and you've raised some legal challenges over the management of those wolves. And I'd like our audience to get a feel and understanding for what you're trying to deal with, what issues you're trying to raise, and your relationship with wolves in Wisconsin. And that goes back so far. I've been reading and fascinated by that relationship. But share that with our audience, please.
Hey, good morning, everyone. My name is John D. Johnson Sr. I'm tribal president of Lac du Flambeau. I'm also the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission chairman for our treaty rights. And as we go along in our history, the wolf has walked with the original man, which means the Native American Anishinaabe. And when the Creator put man on this earth, the man was, I guess he didn't have no company. So when he put this down here on this earth, he had no company, and the Creator sent the original man out to name all the plants and animals, and he had that wolf by his side. So that's part of our traditions and how we take care of things and one another. And when he did that, they named all the plants and animals. They parted ways forever to be brothers. And as we set back now, the endangered species in Wisconsin here, the wolf, we're supposed to have 50-50 say over the natural resources and the ceded territory that we live in. And, you know, we don't see that happening too often. We help with the fish, I guess the fish, the bear, the deer, everything else, the wolf that the Creator has given us. And when we try to put our 2 cents in, I guess we're never heard very good by the state. And when we look at the wolf, what we're talking about here today is that he was put here for a reason, to help the ecosystem out. We have a CWD spreading rapidly, I guess, in some of these ceded territory areas, and that wolf would help manage them. And that's why I'm here today to speak on behalf of the Maingan and Anishinaabe. That means wolf. And he is a very important part of our ecosystem.
And John, I just want to, fascinated by this because it raises an interesting question of the Ojibwe tribe, which you represent, has filed these lawsuits because this represents a treaty violation because you had lands taken from you, and so these guarantees of your inclusion in management of these resources was done by treaty. Am I getting that right?
Yes, sir, you are. And when these treaties were bestowed upon us, we had 50-50 say-so on our resources, and we try to help out with everything that we can in our culture by taking care of the fish, the wildlife, the bear. Like I said, every one of these animals, deserve to live, I guess. Okay. And even though we consume, we hunt and gather and fish, we still take care of the resources to make sure they're there for the next 7 generations of our tribe.
Well, thank you for that. Terry, I am just basically, or Tiara, I'm looking at this question of biodiversity, which is what we're trying to get at today, and have a kind of broader understanding to share with our audience. What are the equities that we are failing to get right from your perspective when it comes to really delivering on preserving biological diversity? And I have to tell you, I just watched Ben's brilliant, beautiful film, but I'm left saddened knowing there are 80 American ocelots out there. I mean, it just, when you kind of look at the fragility of our circumstances until we see it, and I guess, I'm also aware that we're talking about wolves and ocelots, but it's a broad spectrum of biodiversity that we really need to be thinking about. So I'd love to kind of get scaffolding from you on how we can understand the fragility that we're trying to preserve and actually make more resilient, if you will.
Sure. So, biodiversity just means all of the different plants and animals and kinds of life that we share the planet with. And really, we take them for granted. I would say they have the right to be here of their own accord because we share the planet with them. So I think that they have rights, but also selfishly, we're completely dependent on the health of the plant and animal populations that are around us. They give us all sorts of ecosystem services, from freshwater mussels filtering water to pollinators providing us with food to bats eating insects. And so every time that we don't make space for them, we're actually hurting ourselves. And the 23 species that were just declared extinct was 11 birds, 8 freshwater mussels, 2 fish, and a bat. All of them played a really important role in their ecosystem, and all of them, they tell the story of a place that is never going to be the same again because we made a mistake that can't be fixed. And so it's very tragic, but it also says we have to do a better job. We have to stop thinking of just humans all the time and take better care of the environment for its own sake and for our sake, so that we're not just undermining the well-being of future generations.
Tiara, one of the questions I have, when I read that and read the entry, I actually gave me a start. I hadn't read that, before, and I was sort of looking, and I said, wow, we have 23 extinct species. There may be more out there. It just really hit me in that moment. As you said, there's sort of a definitive end to that. And I guess I'm just wondering, in your own experience, you're a conservationist, you've been in this area. I just wonder what you think is the way. I'm sure it's education and all this, but there seems to be a break in how many people that we are raising today feel regarding a connection to biodiversity, a connection to nature that is not a boutique, that's something we feel more deeply. And I'd just be interested in your insights and what you think could be done to turn that around.
Yeah, so during the pandemic, there were a lot of studies about how just watching nature gives us joy and how our health is connected to the health of wildlife, but also how watching the demise of wildlife and the climate and the livable planet hurts us emotionally, physically. It undermines our mental health. And so there's a lot of different things we can do to fight extinction. I think that individuals should do everything they can, but really we have to act at the policy level. It's not just on individuals. We need policies that prioritize protecting endangered species, because extinction is a political choice. It is entirely preventable. So with funding and action, we can prevent any more species from going extinct. The United States has already lost 650 species to extinction. We have 1,800 species on the endangered species list, and there's hundreds more species that need to be on the list. there's 12,000 species that states have identified as being in need of conservation action. And we can take action to save them. We just have to make it a priority.
Well, I want to come back to that in a minute, but Ben, count me as your newest fan. I loved American Ocelot. It's a beautiful, just emotional film. Really kind of looking at what you captured. But I'd like to, I'd like to kind of have an understanding of what you're trying to say. To show an endangered species, a very endangered species, but also kind of to understand that you are a rancher, you've lived on a ranch, and you have different dimensions. I just want to understand, what do you think are the smart, best practices that we should put in place when it comes to thinking about wildlife management, wildlife preservation? What are your thoughts, Ben?
I think that's a big question. It's difficult because I do believe that there is an intrinsic love for the land that is kind of shared by everybody that is, living on this planet. Like, nobody wants extinctions to happen. And I don't think that it's really a choice that individuals make, kind of like what Tierra was saying. It's like, it's this thing that's happening, and if it's difficult because a lot of time it's outside of the individual's control. Like, realistically, with ocelots, there's not that much that an average person can do. It's, a handful of different people, maybe 50 that are in the big decision makers for ocelots. So it is tough. It's really difficult. And I think a lot of it is centered around just not understanding what those species need, or even that they exist. I mean, in Texas, there's a lot of people that don't even know that we have this beautiful spotted cat that is roaming around the brush that, 150 years ago was across the entire state, and now it exists in these two little bitty tiny populations. So I think education is a really big part of it, and I think that getting people to focus on what they have in common rather than the differences that they have is really important whenever we're talking about bringing back endangered species. For stuff like the wolf, that one's really difficult because it's such a polarizing issue that a lot of times wolf management is centered around lawsuits. But whenever you have stuff that's more like environmental based, like a mussel or even like an ocelot to some extent, if you can get different groups to come in and focus on what they have in common, I think that's going to be a big key on conserving a lot of our endangered species, is looking for commonalities instead of differences with the different stakeholders.
Ben, I'd love you to tell our audience that has not, many of them have not seen your film yet, American Ocelot, what led you to that topic? What was your personal connection with it? And I should also tell everyone that you had an award-winning documentary in 2019 called The River and the Wall, which I find fascinating. I've yet to see, but I'm going to go see it. But tell us about your journey in being a storyteller when it comes to nature.
Sure. So the movies that we're making right now, they're in my home. I live in Texas, and in Texas we have 156 state and threatened species and 50 some odd endangered species, state endangered species, and a lot of them are stuff that nobody's ever seen before, and they're cool. I mean, it's like there's ocelots, and I think they may be the coolest because they have a special part in my heart. But I've got a small team of about 5 people, and our kind of mission statement in life is to show visuals of these animals that a lot of people don't know about. And I think that if you can see something and you can see it in their habitat, and you can understand how that habitat is also beneficial to you and to your life, then there's a chance that people can begin to care about it. And, the first step in, kind of getting groundswell to conserve and protect those animals.
Oh, it's fascinating. John, let me jump back to you and your challenges in wildlife. Now, I know that in Wisconsin, some of your tribal colleagues and leaders in other tribes have requested an emergency relisting of gray wolves as endangered. And I'm wondering where that stands and if you support that. And secondly, I was also interested in comments about bear hunts in the past, which were way over quota. And the number of years that, 5, 6, 7 years that it's taking to replenish, if you will, for bear population to replenish after overhunting. And I'm just, interested in kind of the broad terrain of this. Is this overhunting phenomenon? Is it who's failing here? Is it the state regulatory authorities? What's the breakdown?
Well, I think the state is failing in many different ways because of the wolf population. Like I said before, they're going to help take care of the CWD and everything else that has to do with nature and our ecosystem. And everything that the tribes harvest in our ceded territories are counted down to the last number, from our fish to our deer to our bear. Everything that we take is on record, and we have it at our deer registration station here in Lac du Flambeau and also in Gliffwick. So, if we're keeping these and all these correct estimates, they're not estimates, they're correct of everything that we take, and the state is working off estimates only. And you brought up the bear. They overharvested 488 bear last year, and they told us it was going to take 5 to 6 years to replenish of what they have taken. And they're going to have another bear season, and how many more are they going to kill? And the reason I am speaking out for all of these animals is we have to all be a part of the solution, not a part of the problem. And if we could work together and collaborate with one another, I think it would go a lot further, because we do have a lot of experience in taking care of our reservations, all the animals, all the fish, everything that we have our hands in. We're looking out for the future of our children.
Do you have allies, John, that you need? I mean, I'm sitting here in Washington. I don't know, honestly, what legislators here could do or what the administration could do. And I'm going to get this to Tiara in a moment. But do you find them actively engaged with you or ignoring you?
There's a lot of people that are engaged with the Lac du Flambeau tribe and the other ceded territory tribes here in Wisconsin. And it shouldn't stop there, because our ceded territories run into Michigan and Minnesota also. We have brother tribes there. And there's a lot of people standing behind us in this fight, to keep these animals on this earth. When they go out and slaughter, I guess, these wolves in their breeding season, I don't know how many they killed that were female. I know there was probably like 100 or 99 or 100 females that they killed that were pregnant. And how many wolves would they have been carrying? And this is the things that we don't like to see, the night hunting. It's easy to kill them all off, but when they're gone, what's going to help our ecosystem with the CWD? I guess all the rodents, the mice, everything that they take care of in our ceded territory. And we would like some collaboration with the state, the Natural Resources Board, and even our own board members that we have for Gliffwick. When they tell us not to hunt, not to harvest, we don't. We stand back. And that's what I'm saying, that we should all be a part of the solution.
Well, thank you for that. Tiara, I'm sort of interested in, I'm a layperson in this. I don't know this field well. I'm delighted that we're having this conversation. I'm sort of educating myself as we go through it. But I don't know the detail of the Endangered Species Act. I don't know, what goes into delisting either because a species has been saved, or in this case we're discussing today, species that have been declared extinct and they're being removed from the list. But what is the broad commitments that you see out there that aren't being fulfilled in federal policy? What should be happening in this town? What should the Biden administration be putting on the table that it may not have done yet?
So the Endangered Species Act is a vastly successful law. It's one of the strongest conservation laws in the world. It's prevented the extinction of 99% of the plants and animals under its care. And the Fish and Wildlife Service has managed to do this even though they're cash strapped, and the Biden administration has been lukewarm around endangered species so far. They've put forth the America the Beautiful initiative to protect 30% of America's lands and waters by 2030, but the Fish and Wildlife Service doesn't even have a director yet. And the agency needs leadership that fills the urgency of the extinction crisis that is happening around us right now. We have an agency that has a tool that they could use to save America's wildlife populations. They don't have a leader right now. They don't have the funding that they need. And meanwhile, even common wildlife populations are crashing around us, like frogs and bats and monarch butterflies. And so we need a visionary fish and wildlife agency that's willing to take the bold action that's needed to stave off the extinction crisis. And to do that, they need funding. 47 species have gone extinct while waiting to get on the endangered species list. Species on the list, recovery is funded at 4% of the level that's needed. And so really, we need to make this a priority for the well-being of the wildlife populations and the human populations, because our culture, our stories, our identity, all of it is deeply tied to the wildlife that's crashing around us right now.
Tiara, I just want to repeat what you just said and make sure I got it right. 47 species went extinct trying to get on the endangered species list. Is that accurate?
That is accurate. And there's hundreds of species right now waiting to get onto the list. The species on the list are waiting for recovery plans, waiting for critical habitat, waiting for funding. And we don't have time to wait anymore.
It's fascinating. Ben, I want to read something about the river and the wall. According to my notes, you and your fellow filmmakers, adventurers, traveled 1,200 miles of the Texas-Mexico border from El Paso to the Gulf of Mexico on mountain bike, horse, canoe, and foot. I mean, it sounds incredible. What did you see that you can share with our audience? What were the, I know I'm going to get them all, so don't give any away plot twists, but tell us what you saw and experienced that, relevant to our understanding and appreciation of nature and what can be done to harm it.
Oh man, the Rio Grande is it's the fourth largest river by watershed basin in North America, and we share it with Mexico, beginning on the Texas-Mexico line, and it is in West Texas, and there's about 1.5 billion acres of protected land that's in a national park, a state park, and then a wilderness area or a wildlife management area. And then on the Mexican side, you've got about 3 million acres of area protegida of the Mexican protected land. So there's an area along our border that is about twice the size of Yellowstone that is one of the most biologically rich, amazing spots in the United States. Big Bend National Park is kind of the epicenter of that. Flowing down from that, you go into the Rio Grande Valley, and that's also used to be this huge delta. That's where ocelots used to live. That's where jaguars used to live. That's where we have a lot of the tropical birds that are found nowhere else in the United States. So the U.S.-Mexico border, from a biological perspective, is just a freaking wonderland. It's absolutely amazing. And that was really one of the big goals that we had with the film, was to take people on a journey to see the U.S.-Mexico border in a way that they'd never really seen before, and to kind of showcase it as more than just a black line on a map that can be walled off and discarded. It's where people live. It's where wildlife live. We fought for that river, and to wall it off, I think, is incredibly short-sighted. So the film dives into that whole issue and gives a voice to folks on the Mexican side, the U.S. side, to Border Patrol, to landowners, to wildlife biologists. It's a cool movie. I'm very proud of it.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing it, and I'm just, I think it's so important to try and visualize, nature, its beauty, its vitality, why it's so important to us, which we've been discussing with Tiara and with John. Let me just ask very quickly in the last couple of minutes, both John and Tiara, if there were, part of the discussion today is wildlife is beautiful, but there's also, we live in a world of wildlife management and wildlife management plans. And John, you've been sharing with us the plan that you had is being violated. But I'd be interested for those folks that are watching this show, particularly in the policy space, what are one or two things that you think are really important, not just in your case with the wolves and the bears, but what do you see as key elements of a smart and effective wildlife management plan that you could be supportive of? And I want to ask the same thing of Tiara.
Well, I would like to say, we should all be working together. We should all be collaborating with one another, whether it be the state, the feds, or all the tribes. And this is we want our message to go out saying that, that we care about our resources. And like I said, we were supposed to have 50-50 say-so in our shared resources, and it doesn't go that way sometimes, and we understand, but all the numbers, everything that we take and we put back on this land, we have all of that information, and we'd like to share that with the state, the feds, and we want just to be a part of the healing process of everything that goes on in the United States, whether it be our tribe here or all the way across the USA.
Well, I'm really grateful for you sharing this story. Tiara Curry, I'd be, interested in the way you folks, in the Center for Biodiversity, basically tries to promulgate smart partnerships. What do we need to do that we're not doing when it comes to smart wildlife management plans and biodiversity management plans?
Well, there's several pieces of legislation right now that everybody needs to make a lot of noise to get passed. One of them is Recovering America's Wildlife Act, which would provide funding to states and tribes to manage wildlife populations and to recover endangered species. Another one is the Extinction Prevention Act. This would provide funding to the Fish and Wildlife Service to recover the most imperiled groups of organisms. And the third one is the Extinction Crisis Emergency Act, and that would just acknowledge the urgency of the situation that we're in. There could also be a presidential order or an order from the Secretary of the Interior to declare the extinction crisis a national emergency. And then we could look at everything, the way federal agencies are managed, the way federal land is managed, funding to states, funding to agencies to address this crisis that we're in.
And Ben, I'm going to give you the final word. I'm really interested in what's next in your creative pipeline. I've also been reading a little bit about a documentary called Unbranded, where you and three friends ride wild Mustangs, all the way up from, I guess, Mexico to Canada. But I mean, you live in a pretty, incredible life, my friend. But I mean, what is your next target in terms of telling the kinds of stories you are?
So we're actually going to release a film next spring called Deep in the Heart, a Texas wildlife story. And it's similar to Planet Earth or Our Planet in the sense that it's all wildlife, and it's going to be feature length, and it's going to be about my home, Texas. But it's going to dive into a lot of the nitty gritty stuff that you often don't see on, Nat Geo or Disney, and really get into the meat of some of the issues that we're talking about. It's also going to show a lot of the recovery success stories, because I think that that's something that we don't often talk about enough in the conservation and environmental circles, is that, our species has, whether we deserve the responsibility or not, it's kind of our choice of whether wildlife is going to exist into the future or not. It's entirely up to us. And whenever you look back on history at the people that did bold conservation movements, that passed bold legislation, that created parks, that created forests, that recovered wildlife, you look back on that and they are the greatest gifts that our generation has received. So for us not to, build upon those successes and expand them, it's really robbing the future of this amazing world that we inherited. So I think understanding your environmental history of where we're at in Texas, and to recognize that it can be done and that it should be done. And honestly, if we prioritize it, it's really not nearly as expensive as a lot of the other stuff that we spend money on. And and to recognize that, like, you will be very well remembered by, sticking out and defending it.
Yeah. Well, listen, on behalf of Changing America, I'm so grateful to all of you for sharing these really powerful stories. This is one of my favorite sets of interviews I've done in a long time. Really heartwarming and I think so important. Thank you, John D. Johnson, Sr., Tribal President of the Lac du Flambeau Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, Tiara Curry, Senior Scientist at the Center for Biological Diversity, and great wildlife filmmaker Ben Masters. Thank you so much for joining us.
Great.
Thank you.
Well, that brings us to the end of our program today. A very big thank you to Verizon for its support and to all of you attendees. And for any of you who missed the program today, we'll have all this up on our website shortly so you can watch it on video. Thanks so much for joining us. Be well.